Welcome back to another episode of Sidebar Social. I'm Jennifer Grinke.
And I'm Dana Stewart. Okay, question of the day.
What is it?
What does your trash say about you?
Okay, do you really want to know?
Let me have it.
Okay, there's going to be a lot of clothing tags in there.
I believe that.
There's going to be like some receipts to Gucci in there.
Maybe a dead fish.
Maybe a few dead fish. No, I can't find that fish still. Stop bringing that up.
Okay.
That's probably about it.
Okay. I'd have like empty
you?
protein containers. Yeah, boring stuff. I don't think I'd have anything good. But the reason why I asked that is most people probably don't think about what's in their trash. And we have a guest on today who is an international man of mystery, right?
Okay, I'm excited.
Yes. Okay. So we have on a guest that I became friends with. His name is Daryl Parker, and he's with a group called Blackfish Intelligence. And he's going to talk today, not just about what your trash says about you, but about all the interesting things his company can do and how we've used them to help us and how they help other law firms. So I think without further ado, let's just jump right in.
Yeah.
All right, Daryl, welcome.
Hey, welcome.
Thank you for having me. How are you?
Good.
We
How
are good.
you?
Good.
We're excited to have you on. So I think let's tell the audience a little bit about yourself, kind of your history with your company, and just give a little backstory there, and then we'll get into some of the juicy details.
Okay, so I did have a 21-year career in the Marine Corps. After I retired from that, I became a police officer, and then after a few years, I transitioned into private investigation, and I've been doing private investigation for about the last 10 years. So my company is Blackfish Intelligence. I have two partners. Our company is different from most private investigation firms because we're pretty large. We have 25 investigators, and most PIs are just a solo practitioner.
Right.
So when we built a lot of capabilities into that, like we have our own full-service digital forensics lab, we have a background division, we have a surveillance division, we handle everything in the chain that PIs work on, right? So criminal defense, family law, corporate and civil, and then government contracting work. So we do it all.
Looking at you, I feel like most people could probably guess that you were a former Marine, maybe a cop.
I get that a lot.
Yeah, I can see that, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the work you do for family law.
Okay.
And let's get into just what are some of the most common things that family law attorneys are asking you to do to help with their cases?
Well, I'm glad we started with the trash digs, at the top level stuff. So the trash digs, I know that's not the sexiest part of the job, but it really is where a lot of gold is, right? So it's really about investigating someone's lifestyle. And you said, what does your trash say about you? And that's really true, Do you spend a lot of money on alcohol, And if it's a child welfare case or a child custody case, a lot of times substance abuse or, someone who has a problem with alcohol having possession of the children is an issue, right? Mm-hmm. So substance abuse issues, spending money, hidden assets, obviously there's the mistress thing that you want to look for. So for example, if there are a lot of wine bottles in the trash, right? Did that happen over the course of several weeks? Was it in 1 week? Was there a party at the house? But we can sort of look and see based on what we find in there, how much there is, kind of see how much they're drinking, right?
Yeah.
If there are prescription bottles in the trash and they are used up before the date they should be used up, that's a sign that someone is abusing prescription drugs.
So can you tell us a little bit about after you get the bottle, how do you tie that back to, let's say, the husband if he's the one drinking?
Well, it depends on, how important it is, right? He could always say, well, I had a party at my house and there were a lot of people that partook. But if we're watching him, say we're surveilling him, and we know that he didn't have a party at his house, he's the only one that lives there, we can sort of put all that into an affidavit. But if we have to, we can collect the bottles and we can send them to a DNA lab and have it tested.
Party of one.
Okay, yeah.
That's right.
So what you're saying is we need to pour it into a cup. We need to take the cup somewhere else. Oh, wash it. Wash the cup.
Wash it thoroughly.
So how is any of this legal?
So the Supreme Court has said that once a person puts the trash out for collection, they've surrendered ownership of it, right? Now, you can't take the trash if it's still up by the house. They haven't surrendered it yet. They have to put it out for collection. But once it's out for collection, it's fair game, And a lot of cities try to pass ordinances that say that you can't do that because they're trying to prevent the person who's digging in the trash to steal someone's identity, right?
Yeah.
But those ordinances really aren't enforceable. So,
Have you ever got caught digging in someone's trash?
there have been a few close calls where someone saw something happening and they came out and we had to leave quickly, but
I kind of just imagine you dressed like in all camo, like a leaf, kind of. And you're
Like
just,
a leaf.
like you're by the tree.
you know, this is in the city, right?
Yeah,
This is
I would
normally
dress
happens.
in like an
Okay.
orange suit or something, like you're a trash guy, you know?
With
Actually-
no trash guy car.
No trash guy car.
Normally it happens about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, there's a procedure to it, right? You have to take a picture of the trash can at the curb to prove that I got it from the curb. Then you have to open the lid, take a picture of the trash to make sure this is what was in it. Then you grab everything, throw it in your car, and you take off.
And are you taking
Okay.
pictures with a phone, or do you have something attached, like a body cam?
It's usually just a phone.
Buddy.
Yeah.
What's wrong with body cam? They probably use them.
Yeah, they probably go.
Yeah, GoPros. Okay.
We have all
strapped to the
kind-
forehead.
We have all
Yeah.
kinds of cameras.
Okay. Is it common that people are leaving this treasure trove of items in their trash?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about a lot of people are paperless nowadays, so there's not as much of the documentation as there used to be, right? But still, people can't help the detritus of their lives, right? The kind of food they eat, the things they drink, and all that kind of stuff. It all ends up there. So, you know, they might try to be careful about this and that. And some people who know that litigation is coming up, they may be extra careful. But
I'm taking all my trash to your house, man.
I'm gonna plant stuff in your trash.
I got another question, but what do you call? Is there a technical name for the dumpster diving?
those are abandoned property surveys.
Oh, that's fancy.
Good.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about on a case that you helped us on where it was actually really interesting, where you were able to help. Well, let me just give some context. So I had a client who was concerned her spouse was not giving full disclosure on his financial assets. I'm sure you remember this case. And, you know, we told her, look, we could try to send subpoenas out, but now we're just randomly subpoenaing banks. We don't know what we're going to get. And yes, you know, he gave a disclosure of these are my accounts, but she felt something was hidden. So reached out to you, and you were able to get us information about what actual accounts he had in his name, where the banks were, what money he had in there, and even turned out that he had a business account. My client didn't even know he had a business. How did you do that? Because you made me look really good.
Well, you know, financial information is really, really locked down, and it's one of the most difficult kinds of information to get. So you have to be very careful that you don't cross a line. There are all sorts of legal red lines that you can cross. So, but there are ways to specialize in financial investigations and asset investigations. So, for example, the company, right? You know, those companies, all those companies have to be listed with the Secretary of State. Now, it may be a Secretary of State in another state.
Okay.
Okay, but they list their officers and all that sort of thing. But we have the databases for one thing. You know, back 20 years ago, we wouldn't have had these resources. But now we have databases that we can plug in a person's name, and it'll pull up any business relationship that they have. So it's a lot easier to make those connections.
Well, it was really impressive. And I feel like I didn't even know that you could do that. Yeah. So I think it's a good plug for your company and how you guys can help, especially what we see, because we commonly run into the person thinking their spouse is hiding money or hiding assets. So it was really helpful in that case.
So one thing you mentioned earlier was you have a forensics lab. Can you talk a little bit more about what that entails and what types of things you could do in terms of like looking at a phone or looking at a computer or anything like that?
Sure. So our digital forensics lab, I would say, is probably one of the most comprehensive in the state, right? We've done parallel investigations with the FBI because of our capabilities, and we have some really powerful software, and we have some really expert guys who work in the lab. And it's really about taking data off of any electronic device. And that means it could be your phone, computer, an Apple Watch. It could be the computer in your car. You know, a lot of times people don't realize when they go and get a rental car and they get into the rental car and they play a song from their phone. What that rental car just did is it sucked all the information out of your phone And forensically, that means your emails, your text messages, and all that sort of thing. Now,
Wow.
from my perspective, what that means is that I don't need a subpoena to download this person's phone. I can just download the car. I don't need a subpoena for that.
Wow.
So that's one way. But in the digital forensics lab, we download all this information off of a device. We make a virtual copy of it, and then we start analyzing that virtual copy. And based on the case, we kind of know what we're looking for. You know, it's really not just a, hey, find me anything. It's, I think there's some infidelity. I think assets are being hidden or something along those lines.
Okay. But in order to do that, you need a court order or permission from the spouse's phone that it is?
It depends. So obviously we can't get, if it's a divorce case, it's a family law case, we can't get the other person's phone unless they consent to it or we have a court order. And there have been times and cases where a judge in court says, turn your phone over right now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've seen that.
And we're standing there and we download the phone and start looking. But let's say that husband gets a new phone. So he takes his old phone and he chucks it. He throws it in the drawer. He abandons his expectation of privacy to that phone. He no longer controls it. The wife knows the password or something like that. It's fair game. So in a case like that, he has an electronic device that he's not using anymore. He's surrendered. We can download those.
Or if he throws it in the trash.
Yeah.
Or if he throws it in the trash.
Throws it in the trash. Or if it's like a mutual device, like a computer that the family uses, you could definitely look at that, right?
That's right.
Follow us and join the conversation on Instagram and YouTube at Sidebar Social.
To learn more about Greinke Stewart Family Law, visit greinkestuartlaw.com.
All right, Daryl. So I feel like infidelity is a big thing that we deal with in the family law world. And oftentimes we'll talk with a client and discuss maybe the idea of hiring a PI. But I think we have to run through, from our perspective, an analysis of whether it's going to be worth it. You know, what are we trying to uncover here, whether it is infidelity or assets. I'm curious, from your perspective, do you have a similar kind of protocol that you go through if an attorney reaches out or a client reaches out on whether or not they should hire you as a PI?
Yeah, well, you know, specifically in regards to like infidelity cases, you know, some people say, well, how much is that going to matter, right? You know, a lot of judges in Texas, you know, they don't care. You know, so what? They were unfaithful. It's common, whatever. But some judges do care. And also, it depends on the situation that we're talking about. For example, let's say husband is the CEO of a company, and he's very averse to scandal. He doesn't want this all on the public record. He doesn't want all that litigated.
Yep.
And so it makes it much easier for the spouse to negotiate a fair settlement. So really, when we're talking about doing an infidelity investigation, we need to learn from the attorney, from the client, what are you trying to do? What is your goal? If your goal is to create leverage, great. If your goal is to get in front of a judge and make the judge feel sorry that this person cheated on you, it may not be worth it.
Yeah.
And also, of course, you got to look at what assets of the marriage are at stake.
Yeah. And then also, I guess you could get into even what money has been spent in furtherance of that affair, right? Because then that can really play a big key in our world.
Yeah, that's right. We had a case where a man went out and bought his girlfriend a house, like bought the whole house in her name before he was divorced. So that was a big.
Yeah, that's frowned upon.
That was a little
How
bit.
is he
Yeah.
going to get away with that?
The judge didn't like that part.
Yeah, well, he didn't because Daryl was on the case.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I know that we can hire you, or people can hire you to actually conduct surveillance, maybe to watch a person to see if they're involved in an extramarital affair. So can you talk a little bit about how your company, you know, handles that kind of surveillance without giving away trade secrets, of course?
Sure. Well, a lot of people think that surveillance is a sort of a low art, right? It's the easiest form of private investigation. But, you know, some people paint with finger paints and some people are master artists, right?
I'm a finger painter.
Yeah. You can do anything very well or anything poorly. Surveillance, it's important not to get caught, right? Because you're looking for behavior, and if someone knows you're watching, they're going to modify their behavior. So my company, because we are a bit larger, we have a lot of resources. We have male investigators, female investigators, young, old. We switch cars in and out. We look at the neighborhoods that we're going to be doing surveillances in, and we make sure the vehicles match the neighborhood. Is it going to be at a country club? Is it going to be at a restaurant? So all that sort of thing is considered in a pre-brief that we do before surveillance starts. And then we figure out what team members, what assets we need to put towards it, and develop a plan.
And then typically you'll have, if you're doing surveillance, you'll have 2 team members at a time. Is that correct?
That's budget dependent.
Okay.
Of course, everyone has a budget. We always recommend 2 investigators.
And
Because
why is that?
if you're following someone in a vehicle, it's a lot easier to get caught if it's one vehicle, because you have to stay so close to them to make sure that you don't lose them, that they're going to pick you up after a while. Even the most situationally unaware person is going to find out that you're there. With 2 cars, you get to switch places once in a while. You can do a little bit of hiding behind each other, that kind of thing. So you really need 2 investigators if you're going to be rolling surveillance. If it's a static surveillance where you're sitting in one place, let's say they go to a restaurant, well, a single person sitting in a restaurant by themselves, one, they look very lonely.
Till the mistress gets there.
Yeah. And they stand out, right?
Yeah.
So you want 2 people sitting there having a conversation, having a meal together, so they look normal.
Okay. Yeah.
Makes sense.
That actually does make sense. And if you're conducting static surveillance, just watching the house, will you establish guidelines of when you're going to call it off, as far as working with the attorney or the client to say, okay, it's 6 p.m., we haven't seen anything. Do you want us to stay on or leave the scene?
Some people try to do that, and I think that's a mistake, because I think you need to set a period, and that's it. That's the whole period. You don't call it off, because you don't know when something's going to happen. You're there at 8 o'clock at night. Nothing's happened the whole night long. You're supposed to be there until 10 p.m., and then at 9:30 p.m., the mistress arrives.
Yeah.
Right? And if you had called it off at 8 because nothing happened previous to that, you just missed it.
Right. Okay.
So generally our termination is what we call lights out. So when the house shuts down for the night and it looks like they're going to bed, that's termination.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then we'd establish those parameters up front, so that way the client is aware of, what they're going to be paying for, the cost associated with it.
Right.
Yeah.
So when it comes to cost, people are going to want to know, what's this going to cost me?
So if we're still on the infidelity issue, we call that a lifestyle investigation or a fidelity investigation. Those generally run about $3,000, $3,000 to $5,000. They can run much higher than that, depending on what kind of assets are at risk, but that's average.
And is that like for one night surveillance pretty much, or
That's really 3 or 4 nights, 3 or 4
Okay.
days.
And are you typically doing that consecutively, or is that going to be broken up, like a Friday night here, next week a Wednesday, or does it just vary?
If we put it all together, we generally like to do Thursday, Friday, Saturday, because that's part of the work week and part of the weekend, right? But dependent on the circumstances, we might break it up. So maybe it's a Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. Maybe it's a Saturday, Sunday, Monday. It just depends.
All right, Daryl. So we know you handle a lot of family law matters, but you also handle a lot of criminal matters, helping as criminal investigations. And we talked previously off camera about a pretty interesting story where you helped a situation kind of put clues together that law enforcement had missed. And I think it'd be, if you're willing to share, I think it'd be pretty cool if you could share that story.
So this was a murder case, and the basics of it was that there was a person with a gun and a person with a knife. The person with a knife attacked the person with a gun, and the person with a gun defended themselves and killed the person with a knife. But there was no knife found at the crime scene. And so that automatically, the police didn't believe the story. Well, the defendant said, look, I panicked. I took the knife with me when I left the house. It's in my car. I put it in the console of my car. So the police said, oh, really? And they went and they checked the car, and they kind of did a cursory check, and they didn't find the knife. And so they said, well, he's lying, and we're going to charge you with murder. But when we got the case and we started looking at all the facts, which included an examination of the crime scene, we were like, no, this story makes sense. So where's the knife at? He said, it's in my car. It's in the console. So this had been 3 years. He'd been in jail for 3 years. Wow. And the car had changed hands 2 or 3 times. So we went and found the current owners, got permission to search, got in there, opened the console, and there was the knife.
Wow.
Wow.
So
Perry Mason moment.
Yeah.
it was when I walked into court and I had this box, and the attorney was like, "Well, what's in the box, Mr. Parker?" And then pull out the knife, and everybody,
You're like the smoking gun.
So
Yeah.
I think the lesson there is don't bring a knife to a gunfight.
Yeah.
I wrote an article with that title, and that article was for a defense lawyers magazine, and it was about going to trial or taking on criminal cases, felony level criminal cases, and you don't employ a defense investigator. I mean, in the state of Texas, I think only about 30% of defense attorneys use defense investigators. And in felony level cases, you need to use a defense investigator every single time.
Yeah, because that's a great
Makes
example
sense.
as to why.
Yeah.
What percentage would you say the work that you do is with family law attorneys?
I would say we're probably 35% family law.
Yeah, so pretty good amount.
To connect with today's guest, private investigator Daryl Parker, you can follow him on Instagram at Blackfish Intel. And to learn more about Blackfish, you can check out their website, blackfishintel.com.
What would you say is the craziest case you've ever been a part of?
There was a man who was arrested for attempted murder, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and what it was he went out to his front yard because these 4 vehicles were parked pointing at his house. This was at night, right? Mm-hmm. So their headlights were on and pointing at his house, and he didn't know what was going on. And he went out there and he had a shotgun. This is in a rural place, right? So he has a shotgun. He's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And they're like, "Hey, we're checking your mail." Well, they actually were postal workers.
Okay.
And this is during the holidays, so they had all stopped together because they had a lot of mail and they were trying to divvy it up. But this man had been a victim of vandalism, right? Like racist remarks had been painted on his mailbox, and shots had been taken at his barn, and he thought this was more of that. So he fires a couple of shots into the ground next to him and to scare them off. Well, the postal workers panic, flee for their lives, call the police and say he was trying to kill us. And so through the trial, through our investigation, we proved that that's not what happened. That's not how it went, and he was ultimately acquitted.
Wow. Did he get arrested?
He was arrested, spent time in jail. Yeah.
So that's going postal.
Brum, bum. So when the team's out doing surveillance, are they dressed in disguises, or are they just...
You got to be careful with disguises, okay? I have my hair cut like this, right? I was in the Marine Corps for 21 years. I can't help it. And so I don't fit in everywhere. And I've tried to, use a couple of toupees and some baseball hat and all that kind of stuff. It just doesn't look right. So you got to be careful with disguises. It's more about dressing and fitting into the environment and just looking like you just blend in.
So if people were to dress in minion costumes, would that be a good disguise or no?
That was one of our ideas.
If you're at Six Flags. If you're at Six Flags, you could wander around the park all day long in that costume and be just fine.
All right, Jen. So our idea is not that bad, actually.
Yeah.
All right, Daryl. Well, first of all, I don't think I said this earlier, but I want to say thank you for your service. 21 years. I appreciate your service.
Yeah,
Of course.
thank
And
you.
thank you for taking the time to come on the show and for helping us with all of our cases and our clients. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, anytime. I love working with you guys, and I look forward to working with y'all for years to come.
Sounds great.
Same here.
All right, we'll see you guys next time on Sidebar Social.